for COVID. And then last June 19, we had the long-term complications of COVID-19. So tamang-tama, sunod dyan is we're going to be talking about pulmonary rehab in post-COVID. So I won't keep you for long because I'm very excited to hear this particular webinar. So welcome everyone, and I hope you have a good time and a learning activity with us. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Dr. Aniceto, for gracing this event. At this point, I would like to call on the President of PCCP Iloilo Chapter, Dr. Suzette Gargalicana, to give us the welcome address. Dr. Suzette.
Good evening. Off pala.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening to Dr. Greg Ocampo, our National President, Dr. Eileen Aniceto, Chairman of the Committee on Chapters, Dr. Lai Garcia, the PCCP Chair for Continuing Medical Education. In behalf of Iloilo Chapter, we welcome you all. We welcome all the participants in our scientific session this evening. It has been almost 1.5 years since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 disease as a pandemic. And we have seen our first COVID case in Western Visayas. We have made an incredible journey of learning a lot, new things outside of our comfort zone, such as giving new treatments. Usually before, we hear medicines ending with MAB, like it sounds foreign to us, but now we're using it all. High flow oxygen delivery and proning. We have made a lot of progress with our COVID patients in terms of decreasing mortality and hospital stay and improving their survival. However, our management for COVID-19 does not end with patients' discharge. We are presently faced with patients who develop long-term complications. We'll sometimes call them long haulers. So we would like to discuss some of our management and our intervention for this particular cases. So this evening, the PCCP Iloilo Chapter, in cooperation with the PCCP National, is proud to present our two experts in pulmonary rehab, Dr. Ria Celis and Dr. Bebet Dimakutak, who will address these lingering pulmonary problems that we encounter with our patients. I enjoin you all to sit back, relax, as we learn together in this MA activity. Again, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Gargalicana, for that heartwarming welcome remarks. Moving on, tonight's lecture will focus on post-COVID pulmonary rehabilitation, a very relevant and important topic in this time of COVID pandemic. We know that the most effective non-pharmacologic management in patients with chronic lung disease is pulmonary rehabilitation. For patients who recovered from COVID-19, many of them manifest post-infection sequelae of cough, dyspnea, fatigue, chest pain, and more. Thus, the role of pulmonary rehabilitation is crucial to support the patient's recovery, symptom management, and the return to economic productivity. To introduce our speaker, she is a graduate of Far Eastern University Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation, took her residency training in internal medicine at the Western Visayas Medical Center, got her fellowship in adult pulmonology and critical care medicine at the Philippine Heart Center, also took up her clinical research fellowship in pulmonary rehabilitation in the same institution. Currently, she is the Assistant Training Officer of the Western Visayas Medical Center and a Pulmonary Rehab Administrator at the Medical City, Iloilo. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Rhea Ann Celis. Dr. Rhea. Hello, Dr. Rhea.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So, firstly, I would like to thank the PCCP National for providing us platforms like this in order to have an interchange of ideas and knowledge across the archipelago, despite the daunting surges. And I would also like to acknowledge the members of PCCP Iloilo, headed by Dr. Gargalicana, and to the rest of the listeners who will keep up with this lecture. So, good evening. So, I'm just going to share my slides. Okay. So, to start, I would not dwell on the post-COVID syndrome as a clinical entity, for I think it has been well elaborated in the previous lecture. So, I will start with the objectives, no, to discuss about post-COVID and its facets, and to discuss the role of pulmonary rehabilitation in post-COVID. So on to the first objectives. So with the advent of these lingering symptoms of COVID, the Center of Disease Control has coined the term post-COVID conditions to describe the health issues that persist for more than 4 weeks after being infected with COVID-19. And these are your long COVID, my multi-organ effects of COVID-19, and the post-hospitalization and effects of your treatment. So these are called the post-COVID conditions. So as we can recall, the human coronavirus would usually attach the cell surface ectopeptidase and your DPP4 and your well-known angiotensin converting enzyme 2 in order to enter the whole, in order to have the enter the cells. So with this, we all know with these slides, it depicts the location of your ACE2 receptors in varying organs. So it is not limited into your vital organs, your lungs, your heart. So it could even exist even your kidneys, reproductive systems, and liver. So thus, this would manifest into uh, different different complications. So such as the lungs, we experience your ARDS, with your heart, your arrhythmias, your heart failures, and even your acute coronary syndromes and the like. So for the multi-system inflammatory syndrome in adults, this is less common. This is associated with the multi-organ effects of your COVID. Heckman found out around 11 generally healthy patients aging about 16 to 40 years old presenting with a clinical and laboratory characteristics quite similar to your acute COVID with a cardiac dysfunction, which would eventually require your intensive care support that also included vasopressors and inotropes. So they found out that there is presence of SARS-CoV-2 antibodies that had already developed within about 2 weeks in most patients. However, by the time they have checked for a negative, for the RT-PCR, it would really reveal to me negative. So it would suggest that the SARS-CoV-2 infection had already occurred in the majority of these cases several weeks prior. So they would assume that this is a post-infectious inflammatory syndrome. So another research by Tenford et al. Noted that this entity would have markedly elevated laboratory markers of coagulopathy and inflammation and evidence of cardiac dysfunction, which can also be observed in your severe acute COVID-19. So with your clinical presentations in some patients with COVID-19 may overlap with your multisystem inflammatory response in adults, but pathophysiology may be different. So this distinguishing between these two syndromes has implications for your treatment and follow-up. Unfortunately, this is quite new and there is still lack of clear guidance regarding diagnosis that would need highlight in distinguishing these MIS-A case definitions and testing algorithms. So with the effects of COVID-19 treatment or hospitalization, one of this would be your critical illness polyneuropathy. This is described as a mixed sensory motor neuropathy that would lead to axonal degeneration and may occur after COVID-19. So this would eventually cause your difficulty in weaning from mechanical ventilation, generalized and symmetrical. There would be a generalized and symmetrical weakness, note of a distal sensory loss, atrophy, decreased or absent deep tendon reflexes. This may be diagnosed through your muscle biopsy and electromyography. However, there are no literatures yet for patients who were tested for this. So eventually we have to watch out, hopefully, for those publications. So another entity or effect of your COVID-19 treatment, especially for those who are in the critical care status, is the post-intensive care syndrome. So this approximately affects around 0.8 million people every year suffering from your critical illness requiring your mechanical ventilation. And this is noted and recorded in the United States beyond all age groups. However, no data as of yet was recorded for your COVID-19. So this syndrome is a conglomeration of your symptoms involving your physical strength deficits, a cognitive decline, and as well your mental health disturbances. And with this is usually observed after discharge from the critical care that would still persist for amount of time. So they have noted a reduced in pulmonary function, reduced in inspiratory muscle strength, poor knee, and poor upper extremity and grip strength, and low functional capacity, which would eventually result in your extreme weakness. So for the long-term COVID-19, so this is a deep interest for most of us. So this is described for individuals who have had SARS-CoV-2 infection and would not completely recover over a period of a few weeks. So there are varying definitions for this. So some literatures would describe about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and even 12 weeks. So the definition is still quite labile. But this is observed in 4 million people in a survey using a smart app phone in a 4 million people in the US, UK, and Sweden. They have noted around 10% of patients who have tested positive for this for SARS-CoV-2, but still remained unwell beyond 3 weeks for a smaller proportion, 4 months. So the potential mechanisms of post-COVID-19 would be your virus-specific pathophysiologic changes, your immunologic aberrations, inflammatory, damage in response to the acute infection, and the expected sequela of your post-critical illness. So one interesting pathology for this would be quite similar to which it is well explored in sepsis. So like following any severe infection or trauma, the body would react with an overwhelming immune response called your SIRS, no? The systemic inflammatory response syndrome, which this would be followed by a prolonged compensatory counterbalancing and anti-inflammatory cascade also called your CARS. This is a very well-known pathology for sepsis. However, they only proposed this for a possible cause for your long COVID sequelas. So, as we would recall, in your SIRS, there would be an existence of your pro-inflammatory cytokines. However, there is also in your CARS, there's also an anti-inflammatory cytokines. So, moreover, this would divide sepsis in an early as well as in the late. Where CARS would occur in the late stage. So, since the immunologic hemostasis between these two, and between immune activation and immunosuppression will result in either your clinical recovery or viral reactivation and secondary infections, and eventually, if that SIRS tips up, it will really result to death. So, with the symptoms of your long COVID, these are just literatures that are well explored. They have noted cough and loss, commonly symptoms of cough and loss of taste or smell would still be noted in a study of a 60-day follow-up after hospitalization. Eventually, after another literature, they would still note an existent dyspnea and fatigue 90 days follow-up of discharged patients admitted due to acute COVID. And by 6 months, they would majority of these symptoms would be noted still would still experience fatigue despite the long period of time that has occurred. So post long COVID or post-acute COVID rather is also classified according to its chronicity. So it could be subacute or persistent symptomatic, which usually would occur up to 12 weeks from the initial onset of symptoms. Okay, could be either be chronic, or you also coined the post-COVID syndrome, in which symptoms would present beyond the 12 weeks. So this is I think this is a very good illustration in which it could readily guide us in terms of the chronicity and what stage the patient would be already on. So with this, approximately beyond the 4 weeks, this is already in the post-acute COVID-19, and herein we should already anticipate what could be happening with our patients. So post-COVID-19, as I have mentioned, for post-COVID-19, as I have mentioned earlier, would involve several organs. So in this slide, it would really depict the most organ involvement that was described with very good literature, and I will just mention some of them in a very brief discussion. So with your cardiovascular, so this would, the pathology of this would be due to the direct virus-mediated toxicity and your ACE2 receptor downregulation, along with your immune-mediated inflammation, which would eventually affect the myocardium and pericardium, and are the most common mechanisms of your cardiovascular damage. So this would really present usually as an arrhythmia, cardiac insufficiency, even your note of your TROP-I elevation and severe myocarditis. So it is also noted, according to Majid and associates, they noted that there is a persistent tachycardia common after SARS, and this would tend to resolve itself and it would not be associated with an increased risk of death. So with your the renal aspect, they have noted about a significant proportion of severe COVID-19 patients who would require intubation and would also require your renal replacement therapy. And the resolution of this AKI during the acute COVID-19 would occur in the majority of patients. However, there would be a reduced EGFR reported in 6 months follow-up. This was a study done by Hitzdorf and associates. So with your neurologic and neuropsychiatric involvement, the pathology of this would be due to your microvascular thrombi, your systemic inflammation, due to your the direct viral mediated neurotoxicity, and there would be presentations of dysautonomia, deconditioning, and even your post-traumatic stress disorder that contribute with your brain fog. And it is due to the prolonged duration of ICU stay, prolonged intubation that can contribute to the long-term cognitive impairment for these patients. For the hematologic pathologies that would invoke this would be your hypoxia, endothelial injury, platelet activation, pro-inflammatory cytokines would proportionally cause your thromboembolism in your acute COVID-19. So both the duration and severity of this hyperinflammatory state can give a risk of your thrombotic complications even in your post-COVID-19 phase. And for the endocrine, still similarly, due to your viral injury, inflammatory and immunologic damage contribute to this post-COVID endocrine manifestation. And there are reports of DKA, subacute Hashimoto thyroiditis, and even they have report that weeks after this, resolving after an acute COVID-19 infection. And for the pulmonary, the organ that is most of interest for most of us. So this would cause, this is due to your both to your viral dependent and independent mechanism that contribute to your endothelial and epithelial damage caused by your monocyte and neutrophil invasion that resulting to your ARDS. So your common pulmonary sequelae that was noted by Chopra and et al. Your dyspnea, your cough, your oxygen dependence, and eventually your difficulty to win from mechanical ventilation, fibrotic lung changes, a decreased diffusion capacity, and reduced endurance. So a decrease in your diffusion capacity is the most reported physiologic derangement in post acute COVID-19 that would correlate it with the with its severity. So with that, we are dealing not only one organ involvement, but multi-organ involvement. But the one organ that is, as I've mentioned earlier, that is most interest to us is the lungs. So to proceed with my second objective is to discuss the role of pulmonary rehabilitation in post-COVID. So I have to start with the definition of your pulmonary rehabilitation. So according to the latest European and American Thoracic Society statement on pulmonary rehabilitation, they have defined this as a comprehensive, thorough patient assessment followed by patient-tailored intervention that would include, but is not limited, your exercise training, education, behavior change, that is that its intent is to improve the physical and psychological condition and promote long-term adherence to health-enhancing behaviors. So its goals is really to minimize symptom burden, maximize exercise performance, promote autonomy, increase participation in everyday activities, enhance quality of life, and thus affecting long-term health enhancing behavioral change. So as with the components of your pulmonary rehabilitation, these are as follows. So your assessment, your exercise training, your education, nutritional advice, and psychological support. So what are the conditions appropriate for pulmonary rehabilitation? So I have placed this in bold letters, patients with COPD, because this is the most well-studied and well-explored intervention for patients that is really indicated for pulmonary rehabilitation. So according to the latest GOLD guidelines, it is already recommended as a non-pharmacological intervention. So GOLD plus between B, C, and D. So besides this COPD, other conditions that can be considered for pulmonary rehabilitations are also as follows. So your interstitial lung disease, bronchiectasis. I think in the US, it has already been applied for cystic fibrosis, asthma, pulmonary hypertension, and even in your lung cancers and lung volume reduction surgeries. So this would compose not exclusively only to therapists or physicians, but also would really include an interdisciplinary team that would involve your nurses, even your psychologists, social workers, nutritionists, and even your occupational therapists. So why the need for pulmonary rehabilitation in post-acute COVID-19? So as this is an illustration by Lopez Leon et al., and it really gave us an idea on which of these symptoms would really occur the most. So one of the 5 most common symptoms would be your dyspnea. No? So along with dyspnea would be your other respiratory symptoms, such as your cough, and even the presence of your PTSD that can aggravate the dyspnea is also a matter of concern. So with this slide, I have already mentioned the post-ICU syndrome, the the polyneuropathy, the critical, the myopathies that can occur in after your critical illness phase. So this would result to your peripheral muscle dysfunction, and this is maybe due to your deconditioning and decreased lean body mass, fatigue effects of your hypoxemia, and ICU neuropathy. So along with this, it would eventually other sequelas would be your respiratory muscle dysfunction, and this may be due to a dysfunctional breathing pattern, exercise-induced laryngeal obstruction, and even your cardiac impairment and deconditioning, and psychosocial factors such as your anxiety, depression, sleep disturbance, and even your dependency. So according to Siddiq et al., no, they have a scope review. They have evaluated 812 articles and reviewed about 40 articles on pulmonary rehab and post-acute COVID. So these are what they have concluded in a summary. So they have mentioned that the indication for pulmonary rehab would be a COVID-19 pneumonia, severe pneumonia with productive cough, but should be medically stable to participate in a pulmonary rehab program. And for asymptomatic and pneumonia with non-productive cough, they should be advised aerobic exercises and home-based exercise program. So with your assessment as a part of a component of your pulmonary rehabilitation, the same author had mentioned the prerequisites before starting rehab for post-COVID. So basically, they should be in a good general condition, and there should be an absence of your fever, dyspnea, tachypnea, with a normal SpO2 of more than 90%. It should be a decreased viral load, so practically it should be negative RT-PCR, and an FiO2 requirement of less than 60%, and a PEEP, and even for intubated patients, a PEEP of less than 10, no absence of airway problems, and also your there should be a hemodynamic stability, granting there is no arrhythmia, MI, DVT, and PE, and also that patients should be fully awake and cooperative, low sedation score, and there should be an understanding between your physiatrist and other rehabilitation team. So I also got this literature as newly released by the World Physiotherapy, that before recommending physical activity as rehabilitation interventions for people with long COVID, they should be screened for your post-exertional symptom exacerbation, autonomic nervous system dysfunction, and exclude your exertional oxygen desaturation before using physical activity, and as well as your cardiac impairment before engaging in physical activity. So this slide would show the usual assessment tools that that is used for pulmonary rehabilitation. This is recommended in your ATS ERS statement. Usually we would request for ABGs, PFTs, X-rays, HRCT, to the echo, ECG, and for your baseline exercise capacity, a 6-minute walk test. If if available, your incremental exercise testing, and assessment of performance of your activity of daily living and health status. Usually, the most commonly used would be your SGRQ and chronic respiratory disease questionnaire. However, with the pulmonary function test, in post-COVID, so this is quite not a problem with some regions with surges, as they cannot readily do this test. But if it is readily available in your region, and it's with a lower cases of COVID, I think this is a very good gauge in assessing patients with post-COVID. So for exercise training, according to Jimeno Almazan, no, the exercise would act as an adjuvant to stimulate the immune system, and this by inducing your mitochondrial adaptation, cellular generation, and immune surveillance. And this would tend to release your muscle-derived anti-inflammatory cytokines, and linked with the inhibition of your pro-inflammatory cytokines, and have been purported to play an important role in the beneficial effects of exercise and immunity. So it is said that people with post-COVID-19 syndrome are expected to be reluctant to engage in exercise. They attributed this due to fatigue, deconditioning, and low tolerance to exercise intensity. That is why they have suggested an interval-based training as a more effective approach to optimize the load that can be tolerated in your exercise programs in clinical pulmonary patients. They have also recommended strength training interventions that can mitigate and reverse your muscle dysfunction. As I have mentioned earlier, its pathologies as a consequence of your lung disease. So the next question is when not to do your exercise. So the most documented contraindication is really your uncontrolled cardiac disease. Sprue et al. No, of the ATS and ERS statement also mentioned your severe arthritis, of course, because of limitation of movement, and neurological disorders. Sitlik et al. Also mentioned for post-COVID-19, you should be wary in starting this in acute phase of your ARDS, or if simply there is really no indication for pulmonary rehab in cases with asymptomatic COVID-19, and in severely ill patients, or in those conditions that are noted to be deteriorating. As with education, so with education, it's really stressed in pulmonary rehab with the terms of self-management. So patient education still remains as a core component of the comprehensive pulmonary rehabilitation, because it permits all aspects beginning at the time of diagnosis and is continuous through the end of life care. And it is really a shared responsibility between the patient, family, and even your primary care physician, specialists, and other health providers. So these are the following educational topics that we really impose in a pulmonary rehab program. But in post-COVID-19, it's important to reiterate energy conservation and work simplification techniques. So I would mention the recommendation of your World Physiotherapy on a safe rehabilitation to include pacing or activity management for these particular groups of patients. meaning that you should reiterate balancing activities with rest to avoid exacerbations of symptoms. And different pacing has been described, your quota contingent and symptom contingent. So the former, the quota contingent, is usually used to gradually increase the activity. So the presence of this post-exertional symptoms and exacerbation, you should remind this group of patients if there is exacerbation, no, to stop, rest, and pace. So this is in terms of managing their activity, and as well as to monitor their heart rate, which could be helpful in delivering an effective rehabilitation approach. So besides the pacing, we usually call this the four conservation of energy strategies, no, the planning, pacing, posturing, and your prioritizing. So with nutritional advice, so a body this would is well studied in COPD patients, no. Body composition abnormalities are probably common. Besides your COPD, your advanced respiratory diseases, and the abnormalities in your weight are traditionally classified according to the basis of your body mass index. Unfortunately, I have not, in my literature search, I haven't encountered yet recommendations on for post-COVID-19 patients, but considering those a percentage of those who would be in your post ICU syndrome, or even your polyneuropathies or myopathies, they have recommended, no, a gradual progression of caloric and protein intake during the initial phase of the ICU stay, and at least about 1.3 grams of your protein should be adjusted after the initial phase. So after this, a full caloric dose can be provided, and this if the indirect calorimetry is available, this can be gauged upon. So with the chronic ICU phase, after an ICU discharge, a higher protein and caloric targets should be provided, preferably combined with your exercise. So with your social support, so this study by Matza and et al. Had concluded that PTSD and even your anxiety and depression can occur with COVID-19 survivors. So with pulmonary rehab as a part of your psychosocial outcomes, the pulmonary rehab itself may improve your psychosocial morbidity without specific psychological interventions. Coping may be enhanced by peer interactions. So the next question would be, what is the timing for pulmonary rehabilitation in post-COVID-19 patients? So this is a guideline by the European group, no? The COVID-19 interim guidance on rehabilitation in the hospital and post-hospital phase. They have recommended that hospitalized patients with COVID-19 should have a rehabilitation and around the bedside, a critical care, or even at a ward base, or until such patient is safe for discharge to the home environment. They have also mentioned that patients with COVID-19 should have formal assessment of physical and emotional function at 6 to 8 weeks following the discharge to identify rehabilitation needs. So another study by Curchin et al. In Italy on the functional outcome after inpatient rehabilitation in post-COVID. So most the patients, their subjects were patients who were still admitted, and was still in eventually extubated. They have concluded that after a rehab program, there is an improvement in your Bartlett index, that is a measurement for your dependency, and eventually with your there's also improvement in the 6-minute walk test, in measuring the submaximal exercise capacity, and with that, they have also concluded that there was improvement in with their quality of life. So with the effectiveness of pulmonary rehabilitation in COVID-19 respiratory failure in post-ICU, this study by Chicani et al. Evaluated about 21 post-COVID patients pre and post rehabilitation. However, unfortunately, this is a retrospective study compared with a non-COVID-19 group of patients. They have found that pulmonary rehab induced greater 6-minute walking distance improvement in COVID-19 patients compared with the other groups of patients with respiratory failure. So with this graph, this is plotted with a 6-minute walk test over the time of the days post-extubation. So these lines would represent individual patients, and the dots would represent the 6-minute walk distance that they have achieved pre and example your post rehabilitation. So some of them were referred earlier post extubation. So if you can note, other with they have mentioned that other who is on zero could not do the 6-minute walk test, so that is a 0. So if you would note, some of them who had earlier enrolled in the rehab, they would eventually have an earlier improvement in their 6-minute walk testing compared with other subjects who were enrolled in a rehabilitation program later dates of post extubation. There would be a note of their 6-minute walk test, and functional capacity would improve more later than the ones who did it earlier. So where can pulmonary rehabilitation can be done? So there could be several settings for pulmonary rehabilitation. So this would include your inpatient pulmonary rehabilitation, and this would consist of a planned program in which the patient is still admitted or an inpatient care provided during in an admission, and your outpatient pulmonary rehabilitation, wherein this is the most widely available of settings, and either this could be hospital or community based, and a home-based rehabilitation. In other countries, they may offer the greatest convenience for the patient and may prolong its benefits. However, in the pandemic, this is usually limited due to hesitancy in some cases that in some places that there are surges. So another interesting type of setting that is explored is the telerehabilitation. So this may also be a good choice for patients being discharged from the inpatient rehabilitation. to continue their treatment and promote further recovery. So this is a diagram I lifted from Tsutsui et al. Now the telerehabilitation, its components, it's practically almost the same with your rehab program. And I think this telerehabilitation can be advantageous, especially for those who had a distant access or has a very difficult access to a rehab institution or center. So for the pulmonary rehabilitation in the medical city Iloilo, I have included a program earlier, I think late last year, and I have for post-COVID patients, one of the indications that I have proposed on is those with post-intensive care syndrome, as I have mentioned, your critical illness, polyneuropathy, and even your myopathy, deconditioning, and also your underlying presence of your chronic lung disease. Of course, the contraindications, as I have explained earlier, still with absolute would be careful for those with acute cardiac injury and even patients who are still on cardiopulmonary distress. So the setting of our program, we do it as an inpatient basis, no, while they are still admitted, bedside rehabilitation, and eventually we do offer an outpatient rehabilitation. So among these patients, total since November of 2020, already 10 patients referred for pulmonary rehabilitation, and about a majority of them are males, aging around 38 to 86 years old, and most symptoms that are noted by the time of referral would be your shortness of breathing, fatigue, majority of them, but also mind you, there's also a complaint of brain fog and even your palpitations. So the day of illness that they would be usually be referred would range about the 17th to the 35th day of illness, and they would already be rendered negative for your RT-PCR. So the severity would really range between your moderate and your critical cases. And auto support, they would by the time that I would really see them, they would already be in a lower auto requirement, but some of them had been intubated, and one I think is still on NIV, and two 60% had a high flow nasal cannula, but around 2 patients were still on high flow. With the comorbidities, majority of them has hypertension, and this is followed by your diabetes. And about 40% would eventually be enrolled in an outpatient rehab program. About 10% dropped out, and one is still ongoing rehabilitation, and about 20% of them had completed an 8 weeks program. So most of them is not really surprising. Both are females, and both were severe COVID-19 pneumonia recovered. So this graph would show their performance upon beginning of their rehabilitation. So with a note, with a slow, this would really start in a slower pace, and eventually they would reach higher achievement by your 5th to 6th week. And I would really note that by this week, by this weeks, there would be lessening of symptoms such as your cough and your fatigue. So this would just show the 6-minute walk distance of both patients, in which there is, if you would, there's a we have a term, uh, the minimal change, that clinical change that we would really note is magic, with a really magic number of 54 meters. So both of them more or less achieve that. So I have this patient B, for instance, only walk around 10 meters. And by the time she finished her rehab program, she achieved about 290 meters distance. So this is just to show an illustration of the program that we do, and its components. I have mentioned the assessment, the exercises, the education with the nutritionist, and even your telerehabilitation. So we had the telerehabilitation, we had to do it because of the surge, and the patient is located about 2 hours away from Iloilo City. So he initially started on a regular program. However, with the surge, we really have to be flexible and have to shift to telerehabilitation. So the conclusion of my lecture is really to provide a tailored and individualized pulmonary rehabilitation programs for post-COVID conditions. And just a recommendation of mine is to give a symptom monitoring and diaries for patients upon discharge, workup and management plans on the follow-up of these patients with post-COVID syndromes, and indeed a multidisciplinary approach for a proper monitoring and management for this particular group of patients. So with that, I end this lecture quoting from the New York Times, an article that they have captioned that surviving COVID-19 may not feel like recovery to some. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Celis, for that comprehensive, timely, and informative lecture. So Dr. Celis has presented to us the different sequelae of COVID-19 infection and its mechanism, introduced us to the pulmonary rehabilitation, its indications and its components, and her experience in Iloilo as she conducted her pulmonary rehab. So we have here, oh, by the way, at this point, we will now entertain questions, and I would like to join everyone in the open forum. So we have here the first question from Dr. Coloso. How soon do you start pulmonary rehab in a COVID recovered patient, and how often is it done?
So as I have mentioned earlier in my lecture, so for post-COVID, granting that they have negative in the medical city, granting that they have a negative RT-PCR, and they are clinically stable and out of ARDS with no cardiac impairment, we have to really assess them if there is occurrence of symptoms such as your dyspnea that can be really limiting to the patients. So as I have mentioned, those are one of the gauges, no, as well as no, kung less than 60% O2 requirement, can be safer to start, but really the most entities that I really would be hesitant to start them of will be still with the present of your ARDS and your cardiac instability.
But with symptoms like slight dyspnea or cough or fatigue, immediately, say for example, in patients who are still admitted post-extubation, for example, do you immediately start your pulmonary, or do you recommend initiating pulmonary rehab immediately?
So it would number one, it would really depend. No, if example, does that particular patient would have COPD, and with upon assessment, you would still assess that he is still exacerbating. So might as well delay it for a bit. But if you see that the patient is comfortable, just with episodes of dyspnea that is limitation, that is very limiting, and you also see that there is an increase reduce in the weight, in the muscle mass, so that is really a good time to start the rehabilitation in order to help the condition with the patient's
Recovery.
recovery and deconditioning.
Yes. And do you do it bedside only, or do you ask the patient to have it performed in the pulmonary rehab unit?
For patients who are still for example, on high flow, we do it at bedside. So it could be either other strategies that I use would be your passive range of movement exercises. If the patient you can already assess if the patient can, the muscle strength of the patient, you can cooperate, if he can already lift up his hands and without with little resistance, you can already start their active arm lifts, and if not, you can do the passive range of movement exercises. So still, as I have mentioned, and a recommendation of your ERS, they advocate for an early mobilization rather than none.
Yes. Dr. Aniceta's question is somehow related to that question, no, of inpatient rehab. Do you start COVID rehab during hospitalization?
Yes, yes, we do. Granting with protocols. Now, with protocols, I have also to protect not only myself, but also as those of my fellow health workers who will join the rehab with me. So we have to, granting that there is a negative RT-PCR, rendering them less infectious, and we have to wear proper PPE, still wear proper PPEs. We do bedside inpatient rehabilitation.
Thank you very much. There's another question here. What would be your advice for those institutions, especially in the provinces, who have no pulmonary rehab?
So,
Are there simple steps? I'm sorry. And there is a follow-up question. Are there simple steps we can teach our patients to improve lung function? Or should we really refer them to a rehab doctor or center?
So, granting with the pathology, that's a very good question. No? So, granting the long COVID symptoms, no? So some proportion of them would really recover in time. So, I think there are good pamphlets. I think I have mentioned, it was mentioned in the last lecture, no, the WHO pamphlets. That is a good basis, no, of that is a good informative na guidance for post-COVID patients. But as I have mentioned earlier, you have to really assess the post-exertional symptoms such as the saturation during walking, your if there is episodes of difficulty of breathing and limitations. So maybe that is a good time to really have them enrolled in a program. I would suggest, although it's still quite limiting as of yet, telerehabilitation would be good. I think there are institutions who are already offering that. In our institution, we are starting on that, and we are placing grounds for making it feasible, especially for those who are living in other sub provinces such as your Aklan or Antique. So we have to make it possible for those patients in order for them to have a very good compliance, and as well as to monitor their progress. But if it is not really available, as I have mentioned earlier, sa education na part, you can really do, it's a really big deal, no? And very, it's really helpful
Challenging,
or
probably.
really helpful sa patient ang pacing, no? You have to advise them, for example, if it's not really, you have to pace, no? You have to, when you are dyspneic, you have to stop, no? Do your possible, teach them your breathing exercises, no? And as well as monitor their symptoms. So I think a symptom diary would really be of a benefit for most of us to use as of this time.
Mhm. That is a good. In fact, in one of the journals, they said that telerehab is now the new standard in patients with COVID or in pulmonary rehab. We have here a comment. This is not really a question, but we have here a comment from Dr. Ibuhos, one of the pulmonologists here also in Iloilo. This is not a question as a speaker, but a suggestion, especially for the college, no, the PCCP. Is it possible for the college to make a proposal for submission to PhilHealth for inclusion of pulmonary rehab tuition or funding? I think this is a very good idea. No, in fact, in other countries, they are providing funding to encourage patients to join the pulmonary rehabilitation program. So this is one good suggestion, and that that PhilHealth, no, can aid these patients to be active in pulmonary rehab, to encourage them to join the pulmonary rehab. Here is another question. Is there an available local protocol that we can readily use or at least be guided in managing patients with COVID as to pulmonary rehab management? This is from Dr. Paber. Are you aware of this, Dr. Ray? Is there an available local protocol that we can readily use or at least be guided in managing patients with COVID as to pulmonary rehab management? Probably this is for their personal use for
Yes.
in their clinics.
I think there is already a protocol that, or rather an advice and a guide that was already written and started by the COPD Council and Pulmonary Rehabilitation. So you can take time to browse on those guidance if you are planning to start a program. However, ang protocol, it is really stated in there that we are encouraged to make protocol for these particular groups of patients. So I think for I am not really I think in Heart Center there is also already a protocol for these particular groups of patients. And for the medical city, I made a program protocol for those patients. So it would really be a good recommendation eventually, no, for projects that to make separate one for, and I think it would also include your educational materials for post-COVID-19 patients, especially with those with pulmonary symptoms. So I think there's education for the education material. I have seen a comment here. There is WHO educational material for post-COVID-19 patients. I think it's readily available online. However, it's in English, no, and not the one, no. I think it's also spearheaded with your COPD and Pulmonary Rehab Council. It was also already spearheaded self-management for patients with COPD. So hopefully projects as for those for post-COVID patients would eventually arise. So some the one that is really available is in WHO na website. You can really access for that, but you have to browse that one and have to choose which of this you have to be most cautious of, no. So because you are really the one who is monitoring the patient, you really know what to recommend them on.
Probably just simple exercises, breathing exercises,
Breathing
for example.
exercises. Yes,
Yes,
breathing exercises. And
the simplest actually with regards aerobic exercises, walking, no? You can
walking you start with
yes.
they Stanford Hall and Associate have mentioned less than 3 METs of physical activity. So that would include your arm lifts, no, your walking, your simple walking, no, walking for 5 minutes, and a pacing. With that, they have to do pacing. No, when doing physical activity, you have to do your pacing.
Yes. There are other recommendations like walking in the probably just inside the house, or little exercises using simple materials in the house, like water bottles, no, for their exercises. But anyway, this question is related to the previous one. Telerehab, especially those who are indigents. Some patients are not really capable of doing that. So the flyers, so you've mentioned already the WHO downloadable info. Easy steps or modified exercises, especially in provinces without pulmonary rehab. So you already have answered this one. Lung Center also has telerehab for COVID. So this is just for the information of everyone, especially those who are in the vicinity of Lung Center, or not necessarily in the vicinity, because this is telerehab. So the advantage of this kind of platform to deliver pulmonary rehab. Hi, good evening. Another question. We have an online post-COVID pulmonary rehab in our Lung Center. Okay, so this is already mentioned. And those outside Metro Manila may also join us po. So Lung Center is inviting everyone to probably recommend their patients to join in their telerehab, no? Can this pulmonary rehab guideline be posted in PCCP website or Facebook page? Probably the PCCP Committee on COPD and Pulmonary Rehab can answer this. But they have this, right, Reyno, you'll have your booklet with regards pulmonary rehab, which was some are which was translated in vernacular, if I remember it right, Dr. Reyno?
Yes, there was one,
Uh-uh.
this really targeted for COPD patients, but COPD patients with the presence of your dyspnea
Yes.
and easy fatigue,
Primarily for
almost
COPD, no?
primarily that is for COPD,
But
but
probably for patients who are post-COVID can also benefit
yes,
with the kind of
you do as I mentioned, you may monitor or ask the patient to do a symptom monitoring himself, no, through diaries. No? If, for
Mhm.
example, they are doing those exercises, they can note down that during exercise he had a palpitation or had difficulty of breathing. But you have eventually have to advise that when he does the exercise, you really have to stop. So arm lifts, no, are simple maneuvers. Even your yung mga debilitated patients who are still have difficulty in standing, no, you have to be you have to encourage movement, no, even with assistant through your chair transfers, no, with walkers, no, with those who can really have a difficulty in standing up, or no, if at really physical limitation, with the help of your physical rehab. So if it is, I think it's more readily available.
Mhm. Okay, so thank you. There's another question here. When patients underwent pulmonary rehab already, how long do they usually return to their basic capacity or normal pulmonary function? Do you have studies, do you have literatures on this, Dr. Ray?
Unfortunately, there is still, with regards with the lung function, no, the pulmonary function test, there are, I cannot really find no literatures describing that yet. But on with regards to your physical function, in my as I have experience with these two patients, they would readily return to a normal activities about by the 5th to 6th week, because they already able to walk around their area or garden, no, and can even do the exercises at home. So aerobic exercises can be recommended, no, can be advised. No, aerobic exercises, they can readily do that sitting down, no, your arm lifts, no, mga simple na mga movement sa head,
Exercise,
no,
calisthenic exercises.
range of movement na exercises. So simple as that, you can readily advise them.
Instruct. Here's another comment. Actually, this is not a question, but a comment. We hope we can extend the program in Panay Island, even in non-COVID patients that may be needing pulmonary rehab. Thank you for that comment. Another question. Does the COVID syndrome leave a permanent lung damage such that the lung function will not really return to normal as before? Can you comment on this?
So practically, this COVID syndrome is relatively unevolving. No, I think it's still evolving, and we really can't in the long term picture of it, we have still not seen. No, but I have read literatures on post-viral syndromes, such as those viral pandemics that occurred in your SARS and your MERS. Some of them returned, no, eventually to normal. No, 6-minute walk test improved. I have saw that even your pulmonary function test improved after more than 6 months, I think, na evaluation, if I can recall there is a study done on your MERS and SARS syndromes that was also noted.
Mhm. Okay. Here. Can incentive spirometry be done as an initial pulmonary rehab
Yes,
assessment
incentives.
probably in recovering patients, especially those with limited exercise capacity?
Yes, incentive spirometry is really helpful, especially with those with diaphragmatic problem, atrophy, no, due to ventilation. They have been extubated and quite weak, no, and deconditioned. So as long as they can really follow your instructions and be really devoted in using this. So it's for a start, and if it is also available, it's a very good tool to use for exercise. Yes, I think, and also address your atelectasis, no, can help with the expelling of your secretions and help them expel out your secretions. So it's a very good and simple tool to use.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you. There's the link here from Dr. Tibubos with regards to pulmonary rehab, basic exercises for post-COVID. Here in our chat box, you can probably check on this. And I think there's no more questions. Any other questions from our audience? Okay, this has been a very engaging open forum. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I will now close the open forum. And to formally close this evening's affair, let me call on the chair on CME, Dr. Liza Llanes Garcia. Ma'am.
Hello, good evening, everyone. And thank you very much, Dr. Ray. I believe Dr. Ray is Dr. Marian Celis Pride for that
She
very
is.
insightful discussion on the post-COVID rehabilitation. Indeed, very timely after the presentation we had last Saturday on the post-COVID sequelae. So also thanks to Dr. Bebet for that very engaging moderation of the discussion. And on behalf of our PCCP president, who's here, Dr. Greg Ocampo, Dr. Eileen Aniceto, our chapter committee chair, the other board members of PCCP, I would like to congratulate Iloilo chapter headed by Dr. Susette Gargalicana and your members for this extremely relevant CME activity. I would also like to thank and acknowledge the presence of our PCCP past presidents who are here, Dr. Bel Chasoko, Dr. Min Banyares. Thank you, Dr. Min, for joining, Dr. Jepswi, Dr. Malbar Ferrer, and our senior mentors who are here, Dr. Rick Sotomayor, always present from the first, second, and third. Dr. Eloisa Digia, Dr. Alfredo Sales, Dr. Ronnie Zamora, it's good to see you here. Dr. Louis Edolor, Dr. Rose Pingol, Chona De Vera, and all of you friends and PCCP members who are here. Indeed, our appreciation for joining our CME activities. And our sincere appreciation to the 307 delegates who attended tonight's activity. That's another record-breaking activity. And we would like to invite you all and enjoin you all to watch out and be with us on our next CME activities. So July 2, I think that's a Friday, would be by the PCCP Southern Tagalog chapter on rediscovering interstitial lung disease in the COVID-19 era. The speaker will be Dr. Albert Albay and Dr. Julius Oliveros. And then on the July 10 will be by the North Northern Luzon chapter. It will be on the COVID-19 associated bronchiectasis. The discussion will be by Dr. Valencia, Jose Carlo Valencia, and Dr. Michelle Dayag. We will also have our pharma-initiated CME activities. So see you on Tuesday, that is June 29. Personalized medicine and COPD discussion by Dr. Tomas Realiza, co-hosted by the GSK. And I think another CME activity by Novartis, it will be July 7. It will be a foreign speaker. How do we get our patients to treatment goal in the evaluation of patients with difficult to treat asthma? So indeed, this is one thing good about the pandemic. We can maximize our virtual platforms and we can maximize attendance from all corners of the country. Now, imagine having more than 300 delegations. So if in a face-to-face activity, we can't expect this much. So again, thank you very much and congratulations, Iloilo chapter. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. We will now put this activity to end. This has been a fruitful evening. Thank you, everyone.
Good day, maayong adlaw sa inyong tanan. So in light of the COVID vaccine rollout here in our locality, we, the Philippine College of Chest Physicians, PCCP Iloilo Chapter, would like to welcome you today sa aton nga session entitled COVID Vaccination Advocacy. Subong adlaw, may ara kita nga mga experts nga pulmonologists, kag may ara man kita nga mga guests nga magmangkot sa mga common queries that will answer or clarify these questions regarding COVID vaccines. So for our expert panel of pulmonologists, we have Dr. Eli Berabe, and we also have Dr. Halbert Obligacion. We are also welcomed and honored to have our guests, Barangay Kapitan Kausing and Barangay Kapitan Dolar. And to represent the young adult group, we also have Sir Ryan. So for today's session, I hope you would get some information for our talk today. So this is Dr. Ken Lasafin, and I am your host.
Dok, paano kita maprotektahan sa mga bakuna?
Maprotektahan kita sang bakuna kay may ara parte sang mikrobyo or patay nga mikrobyo nga gina-inject sa aton lawas. Ina ga-trigger sang aton immune system para mag-develop sang antibodies pangontra sa mikrobyo kung may tutuod na mikrobyo nga magsulod sa aton.
Ano ang mga klase sang bakuna batok sa COVID-19?
May tatlo ka klase na vaccine para sa COVID-19. Ang una, muning ginatawag na inactivated vaccine, pareho sang Sinovac. So, muning gagamit sa patay na COVID-19 virus para i-inject sa aton lawas para mag-ubra sang antibodies. While ang viral vector vaccine naman, pareho sang AstraZeneca, ang muning gagamit sang isa pa ka virus or vector virus para isulod ang parte sang COVID-19 virus sa aton lawas para mag-ubra naman sang antibodies. While ang mRNA vaccine, ang example sini amonia ang Moderna or ang Pfizer vaccine, ang bakuna nga magasignal sa aton lawas para mag-ubra sang protina na parte sang COVID-19, spike protein, na i-recognize ang aton lawas na mag-ubra man siya sang iya nga antibodies iba nga ibato sa COVID-19.
Pwede bala magka-COVID tungod sa bakuna sa COVID-19?
Ang bakuna sa COVID-19 hindi ni siya makahatag sa aton sang sakit na COVID-19 kaya ang ging-inject sa aton kundi parte lang ini sang virus or hindi gani patay na nga COVID-19 para mag-develop sang antibodies. So hindi ni siya nga pwede ni siya makahatag sa aton sang masakit na COVID-19.
Ano kadugay ang proteksyon nga mahatag sang bakuna sa COVID-19?
Wala pa nahibalaan subong kung ano gid kadugay ang epekto sa bakuna. Ang importante subong kundi magpabakuna na kita para sa COVID-19 kay madako ini nga protection ang may hatag sa ato.
Pila ka injeksyon, doses ang kinahanglan sa bakuna sa COVID-19?
Sa available na mga vaccine subong for COVID-19, usually ginahatag ini sa 2 ka doses.
Doc, kinahanglan pa bala mag-mask or mag-social distancing na kumpleto na ang bakuna sa COVID-19?
Kailangan man natin gihapon magsuksok sang mask or mag-social distancing masking kompleto na kita sa bakuna. Kaya ang pagbakuna sa COVID-19, hindi ini siya 100%. So pwede man gihapon malatnan sang COVID-19 pero napakabakuna na kita, hindi na ini amo ka-severe kung malatnan manggid kita.
Ano ang pinakamaayong klase o brand sang bakuna sang COVID-19?
Ang tanan nga bakuna sa COVID-19 nga available subong napamatud-an nga ini epektibo sa pag-prevent sang severe disease. So kung anong una nga bakuna nga available sa inyo, amo na ini ang aton pilion para makapabakuna na ta subong.
Pwede ka bala makapili sang bakuna sa COVID-19 nga ihatag sa imo?
Oo, pwede kita kapili sang mga bakuna na gamiton naton. Pero mas importante tani nga maprotektahan na dayon ang imo lawas. So kung ano lang available nga vaccine nga pwede ikaw mabakunahan, amo na ina ang pinaka-best vaccine na imo pwede gamiton.
Nakaagi na ako COVID, kinahanglan ko pa bala magpabakuna sa COVID-19?
Oo, wala pa subong nahibalaan kung hasta sano ikaw pwede maprotektahan bakod sa COVID-19 kung kaagi ka na masakit sa COVID-19.
Epektibo bala ang mga bakuna batok sa bag-o nga mga COVID variants?
Base sa pagtuon sa mga eksperto, ang mga bakuna subong ay epektibo gihapon sa mga bag-o nga variants ng COVID-19. Wala untat ang pagtuon kag testing sa mga bakuna batok sa nagaguluwa na mga variants ng COVID-19.
Doc, hilway bala sa peligro ang bakuna sa COVID-19?
Ang mga bakuna na ginhatagan emergency use authorization sa Philippine Food and Drug Administration na pamatud-an nga epektibo kag wala peligro base sa mga impormasyon na ginkolekta nila sa studies sa iba na pungsod.
Pwede magpabakuna sa COVID-19 ang may mga allergy?
Oo, ang mga tao na may allergy sa pagkaon, itlog o kung mga bulong, pwede man mahatagan sa bakuna sa COVID.
Pwede magpabakuna sa COVID-19 ang may iban nga balatian?
Ang mga tao na kontrolado ang balatian subong sa hypertension, diabetes o kung asthma, pwede man mambakunahan. Ang iba na mga tao na may cancer, AIDS, nagpa-transplant o nagainom sa mga bulong na nagapanubo sang resistensya, kinahanglan mangayo sang clearance sa ilan na doktor na pwede sila bakunahan.
Kung nagamasakit ako subong sang COVID, pwede bala ako mabakunahan?
Pwede ikaw mabakunahan sa COVID kung nag-ayo ka na sa masakit ng COVID-19 kag wala na sang nabatsyagan na mga simptomas kagaya sang tilanat, ubo, sipon, hapo, pagkadula sa paningmaho kag panabor kag iban pa.
Pwede bala magpabakuna sa COVID-19 ang mga nagabusong?
Ang mga nagabusong pwede man magpabakuna basta may mga nagkakaigo pagpangandam. Ini tungod na limitado pa ang mga impormasyon sa mga nagabusong na nahatagan sang bakuna. Inarekomenda man na magpabakuna pagkatapos ng 3 ka bulan nga pagbusog.
Ang mga nagapasuso, ya Dok?
Oo, ang mga nagapasuso pwede magpabakuna sa COVID-19. Wala ginarekomendar nga maguntat sa pagpasuso antes kag tapos ang bakuna.
Kung magpabakuna bala sa COVID, pwede ako makapabata?
Sa subong, wala sang ebidensya na nagapamatuod na ang vaccine makapabaog or makapabawas sa tao na ginhatagan sa bakuna.
Maapektuhan bala sang bakuna sa COVID-19 ang iban nga bulong nga ginainom?
Hindi maapektuhan sang bakuna sa COVID ang kalabanan ng mga maintenance na bulong.
Anong maobra kung may nabatyagan nga apekto sang bakuna sa COVID-19
i-exercise, or iamat-amat hulagon ang butkon kung nagasakit. So, pwede man makainom sa paracetamol kung na may hilanan. Ang mga epekto sa bakuna madula man sa sulod sang isa tubtob 3 ka adlaw.
Ano ang masami nga epekto sa bakuna sa COVID-19, Doc?
Panalakit, paghubag, o kung pala mula sang butkon kung diin kin-injectionan, hilanat o kung sakit sang ulo, palang luya, kag daw masuka kag ginakurog. Ang mga nambatyagan na ini ay senyales na nagaubra sa proteksyon ang imulawas batok sa COVID-19. Madula man ang mga epekto sang bakuna sa sunod na mga inadlaw.
So that's it for our talk for today on our COVID vaccination advocacy. Tani na-clarify, naklaruhan, or nasabat ang inyong mga queries and questions regarding kung gaano ka-epektibo or kung gaano ka-safe ang mga COVID vaccines nga available diri sa aton sa Iloilo City. Again, this is Dr. Ken Lasafin from the Philippine College of Chest Physicians, Iloilo Chapter, signing out.